Well, good morning, everybody. Let's try that again. Good morning, everybody. All right. This is supply chain, right? I mean, this is a vocal crowd. So my name is Mike Roeth. I lead the North American Council for Freight Efficiency, and I'm really excited to be sharing some experiences we've had on electric trucks. So you might have come in here with this 3-word question we had in the program: electric trucks, really? So I'm not going to make you raise your hand, but I'm guessing there's some of you here wanting and hoping that our electric trucks are part of the future, and you are here to learn that yes, they are, and they're coming, and you're excited about them. I'm guessing there's also a few here, because there always are, who are like, electric trucks, give me a break. We move freight with big engines, and that takes it, and I'm here kind of to tell myself or learn and convince myself that electric trucks really aren't our future. So I really don't care which side of the position you are. We're going to share maybe I do care, but we're going to share some thoughts on the benefits and the challenges and so forth. So before I dive in, and I'll introduce these guys in a minute, I want to show a quick video about what is Run on Less Electric Depot, what did we learn, and a little bit about it.
NACFE and RMI have now completed our 4th Run on Less demonstration and reporting. This one was called Run on Less Electric Depot, and the major question we were trying to answer was, what does it take to scale electric trucks? The effort began in late 2022 when we scoped the project, gathered sponsors, and then announced the Fleet Depot participants in April of 2023. This was followed by a 10-episode educational boot camp and visits to the 10 depots in June and July, where 122 people were interviewed and the truck, charging, and site details documented. August brought depot profile videos and details from each site on runonless.com. The 3-week run took place in September, where 22 trucks were monitored for 18 days. A detailed data set was publicly shared for anyone to dig into how the trucks were operated and charged. On November 7th, NACFE released initial findings just ahead of a 4-hour visit to the White House that included nearly all the fleets and Mike Roeth and Dave Mullaney of NACFE and RMI. In the next 8 months, the team attended an industry event or two nearly every week to share the findings and gain new insights and understandings for the scaling of commercial electric trucks. Most notably, NACFE held a Run on Less Electric Depot data workshop where 15 organizations shared details of analyses they performed using the data. Now, 2 reports have been published. Key findings include: there have been big improvements in the trucks and the chargers since Run on Less Electric in 2021. Small energy depots are ready now, and large energy depots are gaining momentum. But energizing the site takes too long. Another interesting finding is that the diversity, passion, and capability of the people involved in this transformation is helping scale electric trucks. The manufacturers of these vehicles should make cost and weight improvements a priority. And finally, more realistic data on all key performance metrics is needed. We would like to thank all the participants, sponsors, and everyone involved with this effort. We have begun planning our 5th Run on Less for 2025 and cannot wait to announce our plans and bring another effort. Here again, we will answer the biggest questions for our future of zero-emission freight movement. Stay tuned.
Yeah, so joining me today is Adam Buttgenbach of PepsiCo and Paul Rosa of Penske, and we're going to talk through a couple of their sites that participated in the run. These are sites that we went out and spent time last summer, a summer ago, 2023, talking to drivers, the fleets that were deploying the trucks, the utilities, like everybody involved in making this happen. And, those 10 sites were 10 of maybe only a couple hundred in all of North America that have really any electric trucks at all. Sometimes when I'm talking, people think, well, I hear so much about electric trucks, there must be thousands and thousands out there, and there really aren't. CalSTART does a great job of tracking shipments, and, they amongst others of us, brag about 20, 30,000 electric trucks, but they're including the Rivian vans from Amazon, which are being deployed at scale, but really a smaller van So really, what I'm here to talk through is what we're learning from these earliest deployments, but I think we're really learning a lot about where this is going to go. So we'll get back to these guys in a minute, but run on less, people ask me all the time, well, why'd you call it run on less? Well, it started with the program in 2017 of running on less diesel, saving money, saving emissions around diesel. And then we went into 2019 with day cab trucks doing more dedicated routes, private fleets in regional haul. The two programs that we're going to kind of talk or allude to the most are in 21 and 23, where we did all battery electric trucks. And then in the video, I said we're going to work on something in 2025. In 2025, we're going to take run on less to long haul. So both return to base, long distance day cab, and irregular route over the road sleeper trucks. And there we're going to look at not battery electric, but battery electric, hydrogen, renewable natural gas, renewable fuels, all these technologies that are helping to decarbonize trucking, many of which aren't clear or aren't all the way to zero emission, but probably are in our future. But focusing on battery electric trucks. So what we did in 2023 was gather up 10 sites. These 10 sites all were operating real electric trucks, production level equipment from the manufacturers. They were class 2B all the way up to class 8. Sometimes I've been in this industry, Paul and I were joking, 37, 38, 39 years. And to think we would be hauling 80,000 pounds with batteries just, 5 years ago, but 20 years ago, I would have thought, just come on, no possible way. But we're going to show you some data from that. But at the 10 sites we selected, they were running 291 electric trucks last September when we did this effort. Each had at least 15 trucks, and one site had 92. Those were 92 battery electric E-Cascadia semis in Southern California. We interviewed tons of people, 122 interviews at those 10 sites last summer, published a bunch of videos that we call storytelling. But then we also, that's sort of for the right brain, left brainer, and then, but there's also a ton of data. We looked at 22 trucks over 18 days and published detailed data about how they charged, how far the trucks went, really to validate some of the claims of the manufacturers. One thing you notice right away is 8 of these 10 depots are in California. So California has both the carrot and the stick. They've got the regulations and the incentives that are making this happen first. Like it or not, maybe some of these guys will, or one of these guys or both of them might comment on that. I showed earlier what we found throughout the run, but just to put it in your head, one of the key differences or kind of waves of adoption we're going to see, first of all, the smaller the vehicles, the less power they need, the more applicable they are to electric trucking now. As you get up into bigger trucks, longer distances, less dwell time, maybe you've got 2-shift operation where the truck's being driven during the day and at night, that becomes very difficult. You get higher weight, higher cost, and it just becomes more challenging to do that. And so with that, I'm going to now introduce each of these guys. PepsiCo has both participated in the run with Frito-Lay Snacks in Queens and at Sacramento in beverages. And Penske operated a facility out of Ontario, California. And so we're going to just take you on a little trip to those locations, but also talk about how they're viewing the electric truck adoption across all of North America while we do that. So first of all is Queens, New York. So here in Queens, and Adam will get into in some detail, but they operate in a very dense urban environment with delivery vans. We all love our snacks, right? So delivery vans, that's very compact delivery methods. They're doing that with oftentimes quite old equipment because it's a very controlled environment for that distribution. So some of these trucks, I don't think ever get like 8 or 10 miles away from the location. You can see it there in the bottom in Queens. So they participated in the run. Had the interesting thing here is this is a great example of what we call a small energy depot. So I don't know, 65 vans or something at that site.
Yeah, right about 65, 70 total trucks.
Yeah, so not a lot of vans. They all do, 20, well, some cases even less miles, something like 10 to maybe 40 or 50 miles a day. So they don't require a lot of electricity to do the work. Very dense environment, so the clean air, not having an engine operating is good. Interesting here, some of these vans they only charge every few days. This was a Prologis site, so Frito didn't own the site. They lease it, so they were working with them on some of these things. So Adam, tell us, what have I not mentioned about Queens? Why did you go there early in your electric van deployment? And how's it been going there?
Yeah, Queens is a really good example of where we think electrification works really well. We've got a pretty large and complex supply chain, but when we look at the different parts where we own our own fleet and we operate and distribute our own products, Queens represents a large majority of our fleet, a majority of our fleet that is last mile delivery. And in a lot of cases, like in Queens, that might only be 5 to 20 miles a day. So for electrification, you don't necessarily need, a truck that can go 500 miles or 300 miles in a day or charge at a very fast speed. A lot of times it's just a truck that goes on a fixed route every day, that's depot based, that comes back to our location and can be slow charged overnight. And so when we looked at all the variables of the way that we operate and move goods throughout our supply chain, this is one where electrification fit really, really well. And not only offered us a chance to reduce emissions associated with our fleet in that market and help improve air quality, but also help give us a competitive solution that in some cases we see being more, economically competitive than traditional diesel and gas vehicles.
So, why Queens? And then where else are you deploying these delivery vans?
Yep. So a lot of our deployments are focused on very urban environments. When you think about urban environments, those are typically locations where we're not doing a lot of miles, where we're going to have our vehicles that are based at a depot. And so that duty cycle really fits well for electrification. But in 2023 alone, Frito-Lay deployed over 700 EVs at places like Queens, Charlotte, North Carolina, Summit, Illinois, Carrollton, Texas, California. And so I think we're really at a point where we're seeing the technology starting to meet the capability requirements to do the job that's required that has been done with gas and diesel. And we're now able to start to scale that up across other locations and not just in California as well.
So it's easier to do because it's lower miles, but the impact is pretty small. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, you're not displacing a lot of diesel or gas, in this case, probably gasoline. There's not a lot of emissions from these because they don't travel very far. So how do you at Pepsi kind of look at these early deployments with respect to easy but impacts low, but learning from that maybe to move to, I mean, what are some other sites that would use these trucks that do a lot more miles, and how are you going to go there?
Yep. So even though the miles aren't huge, we might not be reducing a lot of, gas or diesel. These are a lot of our oldest vehicles that don't necessarily have all the newest technology on them. So we can still have a pretty large impact at these locations. And then we can continue to scale and grow those from beyond there.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, when I showed up at Queens, Adam and I were there for the interviews and the data collection and all that. There were some old delivery vans there. And so I think I might have mentioned it during the video. I mean, that's a place where fleets tend to put older equipment to survive. So this site in particular was replacing some 10, 20-year-old vehicles. And so not only does that because when you replace all those with electric, not only is that good for the environment, but it increases your uptime. The employees were it was like Christmas Day when they were starting to see these new delivery vans. I mean, one guy said that they were so small outside, but so big inside. And I didn't understand what they were saying, but their visibility is good. They're this and that and the other. So are you seeing that as you move to electric?
We are. We're definitely seeing that in a lot of cases. And I know there's a lot of, cases where, charge time could be longer than it takes to charge it or to fill a gas or diesel powered vehicle. What we've learned in a place like Queens, where if you're in a commercial vehicle and you have to go get fuel at a gas station, sometimes that can take up to an hour. Whereas as we transition to an electric vehicle and the driver gets back, they literally plug in and can walk away. And so they're actually, moving to an EV actually saves them time, not increases the amount of time when they interact with the vehicle. We're seeing a lot of safety and new technology content go into these electric vehicles. They're quieter, they're more comfortable. Regenerative braking is a huge benefit in an urban environment. And so a lot of the feedback we're getting from employees is that once they get into an electric vehicle, especially in this environment, they don't want to go backwards into a diesel or gas vehicle. They recognize these benefits, they see it as the future, and so it's really helped us encourage adoption. And we found in the past, change management, even if it's positive, can be challenging. It's different than the way the operation runs today, and so anything that's new can be challenging, even if the benefits outweigh some of the cons. We're starting to see now that we're starting to not just get a push of EVs into the field, we're starting to get an employee pull where they actually are reaching out and wanting to adopt EVs and wanting to do more electric vehicles at these sites.
Yeah, and we're seeing cost of these smaller vans be pretty close to the gasoline and diesel counterparts. So, definitely an early adopter, what we're talking about. So let's go to Penske, and this site we went to is in Ontario. And so what you see right away here from my perspective, and Paul will get into it more, is heavy tractors, small delivery vans, medium duty trucks, sort of a plethora of different manufacturers, different size vehicles. Some are backing in, some are pulling in. At this site, Penske has different chargers that they're working on to help learn about charging electric trucks as they then start to work with, hundreds of thousands of customers that Penske has. So I found this to be really interesting in, kind of the area of how do we really start work on standards, because they got to work with, with different chargers, different trucks at the sites, if not at ultimately when we have public charging at sort of truck stops and so forth. So commensurate to what I said, we were there, multiple OEMs, multiple chargers, really working on this interoperability. So how do you hook up a different charger to a different truck? I showed that one truck backing in, so I don't know, Paul, maybe you can talk about how that's affecting you, locations. That's been a challenge with passenger cars. Now we're talking about trucks that are 5 times longer. And so you also added some battery storage there, Paul, but tell us a little bit about Ontario and how that is helping you look across the whole business around electric vans and all the way up to heavy duty trucks.
Yeah, so thank you and good morning, and thanks for all being here to learn a little bit about what we've been working on. And let me also say, Adam, tremendous to be on a panel with you. I see you often in the industry. You're a wealth of knowledge, and all the work that Pepsi's doing. Congratulations on really leading the charge out there, no pun intended. And Mike, thank you for facilitating. I want to just put a little plug out for NACFE. I don't think he did it justice, the amount of work that's been done in this space and other areas. So I encourage you to go to the website, and if you want to learn a little bit more about all the work that's been done and some of the takeaways you can have from that, I think you'd gain a lot of information from that. Yeah, so in Ontario is an important location for us. We look at that one as our test bed, basically, if you want to call it something. We started that project of that location. By the way, that location operates over 1,000 vehicles. So you sit there and say, okay, how are you going to energize a facility to handle 1,000 vehicles that you operate out of? That was one of our key things that we started to think about when we started the project. And we energized soon, 2018 is when we started the project, and we energized very soon after that, and then started bringing in some of the early vehicles, the first 10 tractors from Daimler and the first 10 medium-duty trucks from Daimler as well, and that's where we started. But the intent is how can we bring in as many OEMs product, whether it be traditional or startup, and have multiple infrastructure providers to go through what we knew in the early phases of things. There was going to be items to work through. The connectivity of one vehicle that has its own firmware, as we've learned, and firmware and software on the infrastructure side of things. That handshake, as we call it, you mentioned the interoperability. That was one of our things we wanted to prove out. What has to be done so when our customers are going out potentially to public charging, that they're prepared, or we're prepared, and we have that solution figured out. So the intent was, and almost all the customers that operate up in Ontario have their own uniqueness to it, whether it's the freight they move, the terrain they travel in, the routes they go on, their needed charging time of the day, not only the amount of time. So we had to be prepared for that. And strategically, we said we've got to be up front, in front of this, I should say, and be ready to answer those questions for those customers, which, believe it or not, there were lots of customers, and still are, that are interested in learning about electric vehicles, as well as how will they perform? Will it work for my operation? What guidance can you give us as a result of what vehicle maybe meets the needs that I have? So Ontario was so important there, and you saw the many different vehicles that we operate out of there, and boy, did we learn an awful lot. That if we get into some of the more of the details, we certainly can. You mentioned one of the vehicles you have to plug in a different way, and that was another learning. What you don't know is what you don't know, is when will an OEM design something that's for their vehicle that isn't conducive for the entire industry. So Ontario was built very specific and purposely for when you pull in, and most of the plugins are going to be on either the driver or passenger front part of it. Well, in this case, one of the vehicles, it was in the back, and now you have to figure out how you back into the stall, and will it fit the right way? And so we learned some of those things where now you had to work through some of that. You mentioned the portable storage there, power there. We knew that if we had electric vehicles there, and there was ever if the electricity ever went out, which is one of the items that we all talk about when it comes to electric vehicles. If you live in an area where you're susceptible to maybe power going out because of a storm or whatever, how are you going to charge these things? So we have a portable charge or storage energy on site, which would be about as big as that wall over there, as high and as long. That's how big it is. And to give you some perspective is, one e-Cascadia takes about 450 kilowatts for it to be a full charge. That storage, as big as it is there, can charge one tractor for one day. So you start putting these things in perspective, but that's what Ontario was meant to do, is give us as much opportunity to learn and be able to kind of make suggestions and pass along those learnings to the OEMs on the vehicle side as well as the infrastructure side.
Yeah.
So that was the main reason for it.
So one of the things that, so I was watching the Penske, I was watching all the sites and all the trucks through telematics and the dashboard during the 3 weeks of the run last September a year ago. And up came one of the small delivery vans of yours, who I later found out was doing pharmaceuticals. So they were just delivering pills to places. And it did 186 miles. Now, this was a Ford E-Transit, and I instantly thought our data must be wrong, because that battery pack is not big enough to take that truck. I don't care if it's empty, that van, that many miles. To only learn that that driver was able to come back to the site and charge over lunch at, I think, 150 kilowatt. I can't remember exactly.
It was, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But, he only charged it for like 45 minutes, but because the battery stated charge was like around 50%, it picked up a lot of charge fast, and he was able to go out and finish his run. So I bring that up. I like to, how you're trying to manage that from an operations standpoint, Paul, but I bring that up, but that truck got a hell of a lot more miles than what we think, right? We think you charge them, they run out of charge, you plug them in for another forever, and then they go. What are we finding on charge times and how to use these trucks in operations?
The word that I'll share with you is snowflake. What do I mean by that? Every vehicle is a snowflake, and every charging is meaning they're all different. And now you bring the two of them together, and you bring a fleet's needs in that as well. And it's a pretty complicated thing to figure out, but once you get it figured out, then you know it can work for you. So that example there, it just so happened, let me quickly back up and say, we're lucky enough to have so many customers that are interested in participating in our evaluation scenarios to say, okay, we need to be sure we can test this scenario, test this scenario, test this scenario with the vehicles that are available and the infrastructure that's available there. And we have a customer that you mentioned that just happened to be very close to the area where Ontario is located, the facility is located. So when they went out and started their deliveries, the whole concept is this driver, whichever driver was in that vehicle that day, would come back, eat lunch there, be able to charge at our facility, but it could simulate if it was charging wherever, they could do this elsewhere nearby, and be able to finish the route that they typically do in a traditional gas vehicle. And that's what this was able to prove out to do. So they came, I think it was just under 50%, and because of that vehicle itself could only accept about 110 kilowatt, but the charger had 150 capable. So it was able to get that additional, I think it ended up going up to 90, just under 90 when it went out for the rest of the day. And that's another example, one of the scenarios that this is how you can utilize an electric vehicle when it's a local operation, not big, not heavy weight, and you can utilize opportunity charging as it's called. So it was a check mark and it was a successful verification that this scenario can work for a fleet that operates similarly. So that's what we're able to do.
So I think your point, though, is this worked for this one, but not so fast, Mike Roeth. It's not going to work for all of them, right? It just worked for that one. So, all right, let's go to the last site that we're going to talk about here in our short time together. And this is Pepsi Beverages in Sacramento, California. So here they do both delivery to the stores of their beverages, which is water and energy drinks and sodas and so forth. And they go to the stores, but they also do what they call transport at Pepsi, which is longer haul. And so that's where they're taking these drinks from one warehouse to another to then use the smaller trucks or use trucks with shorter routes. So here they've got 21 Tesla semis, have had for a couple of years. I think, maybe Adam will correct me, but these are the 4 chargers that Tesla put in place there along with Pepsi. And 18 of the 21 are of the local delivery with lower miles. So maybe they only charge once a week, I think, Adam. And then the ones that we really followed, the 3 transport trucks that we followed in the run, are the ones that are going warehouse to warehouse. So of note for me, this was a learning. They don't go out full and come back empty. Because they have these different kinds of beverages, they'll go out full, they'll drop a bunch of water, they'll pick up a bunch of soda. They'll go to the next place, they'll drop off soda, and they'll pick up energy drinks. I'm trying not to say them because I want to make sure I get the brands right. But with that, during the time, 65% of the miles were over 70,000 pounds. So this is really heavy loads. And these semis were near diesel-like performance, 410 miles on a single charge and 1,076 miles in 24 hours, where essentially that tractor was either on the highway or charging or making a delivery. They had those stores or those warehouses were all open, multiple drivers, and were able to accomplish near diesel-like numbers. So, Adam, tell us a little bit about this site. I mean, this was definitely one of the most biggest interest ones in Run on Less because of showing real-world data on the Tesla Semi. But tell us a little more.
Yeah, our Pepsi facility in Sacramento, I think, was a great example for us to show where electric vehicles can really stretch into the limits where I think a lot of people didn't think they could. And I'll step back for a minute and just talk about our supply chain in general to add some perspective. Like a lot of supply chains, we'll make goods in one place, and then we'll move them to a distribution center, and then we'll deliver them that last or final mile, whether it's a customer or consumer. And so Queens really highlighted that last mile where it's at a distribution center and we're delivering it to a customer, whether that's a small convenience store or a large grocery store. In Sacramento, we have a similar operation there. We actually make product in Sacramento, and we also have a distribution center on site. So 18 of those Tesla semis do just that last mile fixed routing where they go out less than 100 miles a day, they come back, they sit for 12 hours, and they run a single shift operation. The 3 that we highlighted are a little bit unique because they entered back up into that middle mile portion of our business where it's typically a manufacturing facility to a distribution center. And so we make a lot of products there in Sacramento. We might have a distribution center in Reno or a distribution center in Yuba City or in the Bay Area. And so these trucks will run long distances. In that part of our business for middle mile, it's typically exclusively Class 8 tractor trailers, slip seat operations. So we'll have one driver come in for a shift, they'll drive their hours of service, they'll park the vehicle, the next driver comes in for that shift, the vehicle goes right back out. And so it's a very challenging duty cycle, especially for battery electric trucks traditionally. What we want to showcase here is that when you take a purpose-built battery electric vehicle that's designed as a battery electric vehicle, not as a diesel, but truly an electric vehicle designed Class 8 tractor that has significant range and has the ability to charge at a megawatt level, that it can go out, run a significant amount of miles, charge in the middle of a shift during an hours of service break for a driver that they have to take anyway, and then that driver can still run out the remaining hours of service they have. And so what we were able to showcase there is that these vehicles, the limitation of these vehicles, when you think about diesel versus battery electric, diesel, a lot of the limitations, hours of service. When you have these same characteristics in a battery electric truck, the limitation again becomes hours of service on the driver, not the capability of the vehicle. And so Mike rattled off a couple of the numbers that we hit and really showed that, I mean, if you had to and had an operation that operated, you could have 2 drivers slip seat and run over 1,000 miles in a single 24-hour period with a battery electric vehicle. And to give you some perspective, that's probably more than double the typical miles annually that we would run on a vehicle. So that really shows where I think, with those specific capabilities, battery electric vehicles can start to penetrate that over-the-road long-distance diesel market and also help deliver some of the most positive economics as well. Because a lot of times with battery electric, we see on average that they cost more up front, but they have lower operating costs. And so the more miles you do is the more opportunity you have for saving on the OpEx side of the business. And so this is also where we see some of those favorable economics for battery electric vehicles.
So so all of that, really is encouraging. It's encouraging for, what we've sort of had as a limit to battery electric trucks. So, but now you kind of get into this large energy depot that we talk about at NACFE. Now you're asking the utility to give you a lot of power, and because you're operating a lot of miles and you got to charge at that location, and sometimes very fast charging. So, how is that in your minds, or what have you learned so far on that side of the equation? Because that's a big challenge. Some of these sites, trucking sites, we're talking about 2 to 3 times the power of a major sports arena or a small town. So, tell us about that. How are you dealing with that?
So I think like many fleets, just about every utility is going to be different as well. So you can have different experiences, even with different utilities that are 10 miles apart. And we've seen that in different parts of the country where we might have 2 facilities that are pretty close, and just within 10 miles of each other, there's different rate structures, there's different timelines on getting at certain amounts of power. Sometimes it's faster to get a lot of power than it is a middle amount of power. So I think every opportunity is going to be unique in and of itself. And so what we've learned is planning ahead a lot really helps with that problem. In Sacramento, we've been fortunate. We've been able to get 3 megawatts from our local utility there. And that's enabled us to power 4 750 kilowatt chargers, which has really met the needs for those 3 over-the-road vehicles, as well as the 18 that do last mile distribution. Because like Mike said, they might only charge once a day. So a lot of times when you go to look at your fleet operations, it's, how many miles are the trucks doing that are leaving there? What is the opportunity you have for charging? Can you charge over a 12-hour period of time? Or do you have a 1-hour period of time between shifts? And I think a lot of that will influence what the strategy is on how much power you need. Do you complement that demand from the utility with some battery storage, truck rotation, multiple trucks per single charger? I think there's a lot of different things that go into making that work.
Yeah, I would encourage, if you're a shipper and trying to figure out electric trucks, think about putting a charger at your locations. Get that opportunity charging. That might really help these guys that are trying to deploy these electric vehicles get out and then get back and do enough miles to really make it work. So I'm going to open it up for questions from you guys. So think about a question you want to ask. But I want one for these guys before we move on, and that is cost. So Adam, you talked about the upfront cost being higher, infrastructure being high, but operating costs you save on. In passenger car, that's been the discussion, but that's really hard, right? We don't want to spend any more money than we possibly do. Trucking is different. These trucks in this future are tools. You'll come up with the capital if you're going to save the operating costs. But with respect to smaller trucks to bigger trucks, where are we at with cost, and what needs to happen to make this successful over time? Either one of you.
I mean, we can't hide the fact or not share the fact it's an expensive proposition. I mean, we have to be honest with ourselves. We all have to understand that. You just got to put it in perspective, though. So light duty, it's 1.5 to 2 times the cost of a traditional gas. Medium duty is 2.5 to 3 times, and heavy duty is close to 3 times, if not a little bit more, depending upon which brand you go with. Infrastructure, that has its own cost, and then operating it, we think is going to be a little bit less over time. We're still learning that today. So when you package it all together, it's a big step forward for a fleet. You got to really look at this to say, does it make sense for me right now? But the cost is real. I don't believe it's going to come down anytime in the near term. The other thing I want to mention is the cost of the electricity itself. But let me just comment on one thing that you were going through earlier. I used to think the truck was going to be the one that caused the biggest delay, and then the infrastructure maybe would fall in second, and then other things third. The truck is not the delay anymore. I think the OEMs have done a great job, whether it be traditional or startups, to make the vehicles available. The technology has actually improved to a point. A lot of the examples that you gave, Adam, share that. And then I thought the infrastructure would be the next one. And I don't even think that's the one that's slowing things up, because many of the OEMs on the infrastructure side have also done a great job to enhance, improve, develop, and evolve what those options are. I think that what's causing the delays, or will cause the delays for this to really start to take off and ramp up, is the utility companies. Their ability to provide the power that is needed. You highlighted some of what you would need for what you're doing today, and we're in a similar boat. And it's not any one state. This is collectively around the country. So when we get maybe to some closing thoughts, I'll share some suggestions, that we're giving to our fleets, our customers, on what they need to be doing today in order to be prepared for the future. But from a cost side, it's real, it's here. You got to manage it. You got to figure out if it can make sense for your operation.
So, Adam, anything to add? I mean, like from a cost standpoint, there's years or maybe part of a decade we're going to have to muscle through. Longer term, do we see TCO advantages here?
Yeah, just to build on what Paul said, I think Paul's exactly right, and I think a lot of attention gets put in the wrong place on the vehicles. A lot of people start with their strategy there, but I'd really encourage you to start with the energy you're going to need. And so it's, I think we're used to calculating, how much, diesel we need based on how many miles we need to go. We can do that same math on how much electricity we're going to need as well. And that's really where to start, because you're going to need that power first, then the infrastructure, and then the truck should be the last piece of that strategy when thinking about decarbonizing transportation. And a lot of what Paul said too, we're starting to see in the automotive side and in the light duty side, pricing become a lot more competitive for us. And then, on average, I think in the heavy duty side, on average, prices are still more expensive. But if you think about that total cost equation, which is going to be different for every fleet, every operation, even internally for us, it's different. But a lot of times when you think about TCO, or total cost of ownership, there's a fixed part of it, which is going to be your upfront capital investment, which on average might be higher. But then when you think about your operating expense, whether it's the cost of a driver, your cost of maintenance, the cost of energy, a lot of those other miscellaneous costs that go into that, in some cases, I think there's a lot of opportunity for savings. In some cases, there's not. In some cases, electricity could be very expensive and challenge the current cost of diesel or exceed it. But we do see a lot of cases where it can be lower and offer a significant amount of savings. And then it becomes, how much can you utilize that vehicle? If you can do a lot of miles and gain a lot of savings on the OpEx side, on that variable cost, it can help offset some of that upfront fixed cost. And so I think we do see, especially in these two examples with Queen and Sacramento, that there are pathways to having a positive TCO while being able to decarbonize our operations.
Very cool. Questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I appreciate you guys touching on cost, because, and I want to clarify my question. I'm not a skeptic. I fall into your first category, but I don't know a lot about it. So my questions are going to come across as category 2, but I'm actually the person. So I'm hearing two different things. So on the Penske side, you're saying, hey, a larger tractor, 2 to 3 times the cost of diesel, but you're also saying, well, cost savings if we get the utilization up. And that's true with anything, right? Aircraft, trucks, utilization is always a good thing, and it reduces the off. You never see just somebody say, this is what we're paying in relation to diesel. So if I had an electric tractor and I had a diesel tractor, and I filled them out on average, not negotiating power, and I get the power site, because I do have one more question. Which is more expensive? If both are empty, which is more expensive, and how more expensive is it? If I'm just on average, I'm charging it versus on average, diesel's different all, by region. Which is more expensive?
What state you in? I say that tongue in cheek, but I think I always speculate this.
Which is probably more expensive, and then let's talk Texas.
What time of the day are you charging?
See, and that's the thing. So you lose a lot of your flexibility, your operational flexibility.
You do. I mean, you really do. I mean, if you're charging, and I mean, come on. My oldest son lives there. When it was 110 degrees, they were running the air conditioner all day. Peak peak hours. So your cost of electricity, if you're charging from noon to 7 at night, is going to be significantly higher, and you very well could be paying more for for kilowatt cost than the equivalent of diesel. If you're charging at the optimal times of, say, 11 o'clock at night to 5 in the morning, you could be spending less. It really just depends.
So there may be an optimization whole platform down the road of optimizing.
There already is. I mean, it comes down to fleet by fleet.
By the way, I'm a consultant, that's why I'm curious. But the other question I had, and I'll be quick, is from I think it's probably more on the Penske side, because it sounds like Pepsi, you guys have your facilities, you can negotiate. On the Penske side, how are you handling, you hear stories of people that did plan ahead and they open up a facility and then the municipality shows up and says, no, you're not doing this, after you drop the cost and they don't right or wrong. How are you handling it from a Penske side where you might have 400 different customers across a single service area like Ontario? And are they running into that? And I mean, how are you guys handling that and then selling that?
I'll be brief because that's a big question that could take a while to answer. So we have 1,000 locations around North America, and we've already made our own assessment as to what we need to do to modify a facility. We're also going through and these are what we tell our customers as well, so it's kind of similar. Do we own the property or do we lease it? If we own it, we can do whatever we need to do to the property, and if we lease it, we ought to be sure we engage the landlord, and that's what we're telling our lease customers that operate their facilities. You need to be prepared for that conversation with a landlord, and you need to be to see if the property itself can bring the power in, or if the building itself can handle the power that be distributing. So those are important upfront discussions that have to happen. We tell them, listen, you need to be talking with your utility company. Adam touched on this. You need to talk to your utility company right away. But it's not just that. It's a three-part discussion, or three-part strategy, I should say, that we are having discussions and guiding our customers on. One is you have to have a fleet strategy. You have to understand, if you operate 10, are you going to electrify all 10? Are you going to do 2? Are you going to expand over time? Then you have a facilities discussion. Are you going to be there for 3 years? Are you going to be there for 5 years? Are you going to expand your fleet when you're still there? And if so, is that the right location for you? The third one is talk to your utility company. Based on your first 2 strategies for fleet and building or facility, can they bring in the power you need today and in the future? Those are important discussions to have, and you have to have those proactively up front so a fleet is prepared for when they're looking to go and take that next step. That's how we're approaching it. That's the guidance we're giving to our customers on how they should be thinking about it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yes.
Thanks for the time. I appreciate the content. Can you speak, there's some states that have introduced some benchmarking energy usage, how that has impacted what you're doing? Is that in the plan, or is that just a curveball that you get dealt and how you're addressing it?
Are you referring to the California regulation, the California guidance that was given?
Yeah, there's some other states as well. I don't want to misquote which states are going after.
Sure. You want to comment on it, or want me to?
No, go.
So it's the first time that a formal agreed to regulation was put in motion by the California PUCs. I think it's interesting how the dates that they put out there. I think it's like 7 years for a new substation, and 3 years for this, and a year or 18 months for that. I think all that does is allow fleets to start to better plan. And depending upon if you can get the power, you're already ahead of the game. If you need the power, now you understand what that utility company's guidance has been given in order to provide the power. So it's so new. It literally just came out a couple of weeks ago. I think we're all trying to digest that to see now how does everyone now pivot to what their strategy needs to be. But I think you're going to see more and more states need to put this guidance out there. So you understand the power isn't just for transportation. The power that these utility companies are trying to provide is for data centers and advancement of new businesses in the communities, community expansion as well. So the need and the demand for power is not just for transportation, which is putting a lot of pressure on utility companies. I always say think of your own business. If you own a business and you sit there and say, somebody wants to buy more of your product, why wouldn't you want to sell more of your product? That's why you're in business. Utility companies, the same situation. But they have limitations on what they can do and the time frame they can do it. These guidelines being put on the utility companies by the state, I think, helps a little bit. But some of us kind of look at it and say, that's interesting. You're going to wait 8 years to put a new substation in? Huh, okay. Does that mean we can't electrify our fleet because where we operate, that utility company is not going to be able to provide the power. So what do we do with regards to the regulation that's is already in motion for a fleet? Without going, maybe we'll get into some of that, but you have in California, you have the ACF as well as the ACT. It's already in. These are the things that people are starting to think about as it relates to the regulations. And now this one has been put out there, it adds another layer of complexity to it.
Yeah, I think the last couple of years, there's certainty around electric trucking. And so we're starting to see a lot of things happen. I mean, there's some tools being developed right now that look at diesel and gasoline truck movements and predicting where we're going to need all of this electric charging and so forth. That's incredible data that's just starting to emerge as a tool for like all of us to help figure this out. A couple more quick questions. Yes, sir.
Well, you're looking at, obviously the utility infrastructure is huge and has a big impact, but as you're rolling out fleets and future sites, is there anything else about the real estate or the requirements for warehouses and size requirements that changes as you're rolling out electric fleets, other than the need for more power?
Go ahead.
Yeah, we look at a lot of different variables, especially if we go to a new site or we're doing construction there. It's, what can we do ahead of time? If it's, prep ahead, even putting conduit in the ground, something as simple as that. A lot of it starts with looking at the operation. Is it going to be one of those last mile distribution centers to where we need, maybe we need 10 megawatts a day, but we need it over a 12-hour period? Or is it where we need 10 megawatts and we only have a 1 hour period to charge? And a lot of that influences, what the infrastructure layout looks like. In a lot of cases like Queens, the future build out when that site is totally complete might be a 1-to-1 truck to charger ratio. That's a slow charging AC overnight charging setup. Other situations might be more of a gas station model where it's megawatt level charging, and a driver gets back from a shift, they pull up, they charge, and then they go park the vehicle. So I think it really depends on every site's going to be a little bit unique and different. Depending if you're operating delivery vans, what the efficiency is or the kind of MPG equivalent for that vehicles are, or if you're going up to a Class 8 vehicle and you possibly need more power to go that same distance. So it really depends on what the operation looks like first, and then designing that site, whether it is 1-to-1 charging, 1-to-6 charging, whatever that ratio is.
One last question right here.
So far, you've basically talked about closed network, that it's all within Pepsi, it's all within your own closed network. Is there any, let's say, longer term for, especially when you mentioned long-haul semi-trucks, for a public network? Because we've done some research ourselves, and at the moment, given what charging network is out there, even with just DC fast chargers, where you're going to spend 3 hours plus charging your truck, it just doesn't seem feasible to go cross country in these. So is it going to stay a lot of closed network where you own the charging facility, or does it go public?
I think I keep saying that this is not a sprint. It's not even a marathon. And what I mean by that is there's no end point, like a marathon race, when you're done. This is a journey, and this is going to take time. And there's a program that's being sponsored by Department of Energy and other federal departments that trying to electrify the corridors, the interstate corridors and everything. But we know that's going to take several years to accomplish. So what comes first? You put the chargers, the infrastructure in the truck stops, or do you wait for the vehicle to be able to go a long enough distance that it makes sense to even do that? Because today, drivers can only go 500 miles if they're going over the road unless you have team drivers. And a vehicle today can't go more than 500 miles in charge because of the limitation in the battery. So there's limitations today to even get to that point, but you got to start planning and thinking about that. We talked about how do you plan for the amount of power that's needed, where should it go. So there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes that not many people are aware of, but to electrify the interstates, that's being thought through right now. But I think that's several years out. I don't think we're going to see over-the-road electric vehicles for some time now. I think it's going to stay more regionalized, sort of like the model that Adam has and some of the customers that operate electric vehicles for us today. It'll be behind the fence for themselves. I'm not even sure, it's my own opinion now. You may feel differently, Mike may feel differently. I also don't think for most commercial customers that public charging is going to be utilized beyond the business day. Because now you're asking a driver to either figure out, it worked for the one example we gave where a van came back to our facility to drive rate lunch. We planned for that. But that doesn't work for every customer. So to say that they're going to do their route and go find a public station, hope that it's available, hope that it's DC fast charging, hope that it coincides with their lunch hour, that's a lot to coordinate from a public charging that's not over the road type of solution. But it'll have a place, and it'll have a place at certain instances. But to your main question, I think over the road charging is going to come down the road, not in the near term. You feel any differently?
Yeah, no, I mean, exactly what Paul said. I mean, I think both of our examples here are private behind-the-fence charging that we're doing ourselves to help get started. Now, we would definitely like to see retail and available charging. For us, I think we would use that as a range extension. I don't think it would necessarily change our strategy of putting in infrastructure at our own locations. And we've even announced a couple of partnerships with companies like Terawatt to help build out public retail charging, really focused on Class 8 tractor trailers with a focus on megawatt level charging. It's got to help deliver that diesel-like performance and be competitive operationally. And I think as that gets built out, we will be able to see range extension from our location. So from Sacramento, we might be able to go further out because we know on an hours of service break, we can stop somewhere and charge for 30 minutes, get back on the road, and then finish out that driver's day. So I think at least starting out, a lot of it is focused there. But I think there is opportunity for retail. And if you look back at what we did about 15 years ago with natural gas, when we started to grow our natural gas fleet, we actually partnered with a couple of companies to build public stations next to where our manufacturing facilities were. And so we kind of acted as that, primary customer that they had as an anchor agreement to help get things going. And then they were public and retail open stations that other people could leverage as well. And so I think you could see some of that start to develop too, as more and more vehicles get out there.
So we got to end it there. As Paul said, runonless.com is where a lot of free information, there's no cost to any of that with respect to the data we talked about, the videos we talked about, and so forth. So have a look at that and reach out to us if you got any questions. Thanks, guys, for your time and your openness. This is the beginning of a, gosh, I hate to say it, I never run a marathon. More than a marathon sounds like a lot. But this is a journey. So thanks for sharing, and thank you all for coming.